I thought she was my salvation, but in the end, she was the one who destroyed my life. Before I met Lana, my life was a whirlwind. My job as a lawyer kept me on my toes, constantly throwing me into battles, both inside and outside the courtroom. Every case was a war, every client a new crisis. My days were filled with endless arguments, late-night research, and the pressure of always being one step ahead of my opponents. There was an almost addictive thrill to it. The constant push, the adrenaline rush of winning, the satisfaction of proving people wrong. But outside of work, things weren't much different. I had lived through betrayals, heartbreaks, and disappointments that hardened me. People came and went, some leaving scars deeper than others. Trust had become a currency too expensive to spend, and I carried my cynicism like a shield. My world was a battlefield, and I had long stopped expecting peace. And then I met her. It was a late afternoon in the city park. I had no particular reason to be there. I just needed air, a brief moment away from the walls of my office. That's when I saw her. A woman crouched by the pond, tossing small pieces of bread into the water. The ducks gathered around her, fearless, as if they knew she meant them no harm. She was different from the women I usually noticed. Not strikingly beautiful in the conventional sense, but there was something about her, something quiet, something oddly calming, and then it happened. She shifted her weight, perhaps leaning too far forward, and in a sudden, ungraceful motion, she tumbled into the water. There was no dramatic splash, just an awkward flailing of limbs as she struggled to find her footing in the shallow pond. People around her gasped, but no one moved. Without thinking, I ran forward and reached for her. Her hands, cold and trembling, grasped onto mine as I pulled her out of the water. Her dress was soaked, clinging to her slender frame, and her hair stuck to her face in wet strands. She looked up at me with wide, embarrassed eyes, and then, to my surprise, she started laughing. Soft, genuine laugh, completely unbothered by the scene she had just caused. "Well," she said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "That was graceful." I found myself smiling. "You okay?" "Yeah, just wet. And probably the dumbest person in this park. Maybe just the clumsiest." Her eyes twinkled. "Good to know I hold some kind of record. That was Lana." From that moment on, she became an anchor in my chaotic world. While everything else around me was intense, demanding, and exhausting, she was my quiet place. She had this strange way about her, a mix of awkwardness and charm, a little bit of oddity wrapped in kindness. She wasn't like anyone I had met before. She was curious about everything, but never in an intrusive way, just an innocent fascination with the world and the people around her. We started seeing each other often, and I realized something that scared me more than anything. I was letting my guard down. I told her things I had never told anyone, about the pressures of my job, the betrayals I had faced, the people who had hurt me. And she listened, not just to respond, not just to fill the silence, but as if she truly wanted to understand me. She had a way of remembering details, small things I barely recalled saying. It was as if she was cataloging every word, every story, every piece of me. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Not just as a lawyer, not just as someone who had to keep proving himself. Just as me. We got married 5 months later. It was fast. Too fast, according to everyone who knew me. But I didn't care. Lana made my world softer. She made life simpler. I had spent so long fighting, clawing my way through every challenge, always expecting the worst. But with her, I didn't have to fight. I could just exist. She dedicated herself to making our life together easy, comfortable. Every morning she would have my coffee ready just the way I liked it. She made sure I never forgot important dates or events, almost as if she could anticipate my mistakes before I even made them. And the stories, she never got tired of them. She wanted to know everything about me. My childhood, my struggles, the moments I regretted, the victories I was proud of. And she never forgot a single thing. Sometimes she'd remind me of details even I had forgotten, as if she had memorized my life better than I had lived it. At the time, I thought it was love. Now, I wonder if it was something else entirely. The first time I felt it, that nagging sense of unease, it was subtle, a whisper in the back of my mind, easy to ignore. It happened one evening while Lana and I were sitting in our living room, watching the evening news. The anchor's voice was calm, almost detached, as he reported a recent tragedy. A man had been found dead in his apartment, an apparent suicide. I wasn't really paying attention until they showed his photo on the screen. My stomach clenched. I knew him. His name was Daniel Carter. We had gone to college together, but he had never been a friend. If anything, he had been a constant thorn in my side, one of the guys who thought it was hilarious to humiliate me every chance he got. Nothing too brutal. Nothing that would leave scars, at least not the kind people could see. Just the quiet kind of cruelty, sneering insults, whispers. Behind my back, little pranks meant to make me look foolish. It was the kind of thing you learn to shrug off, but it stays with you anyway. I stared at the screen, feeling an odd mixture of emotions. Surprise, a tinge of bitterness, maybe even a little satisfaction. Lana's voice cut through the silence. Maybe his conscience finally got to him, she said, her tone light, almost amused. I turned to her, frowning. What? She shrugged. Well, he was a bully, wasn't he? People like that never think they'll have to answer for what they've done. Her words were casual, as if she were talking about some nameless character in a movie, not a real person. A dead person. I let it go. Maybe she was just making an offhand comment, but it stuck with me. A few weeks later, another name from my past resurfaced in the headlines. Professor Adrian Holloway, the man who had once tried to get me expelled from law school. It had been years ago, but I still remembered the way he had looked at me, like I was nothing, like I wasn't good enough to be there. He had made it his mission to push me out, to make me feel like I didn't belong. And now, there he was, plastered across news articles. Fired in disgrace after scandal, the headlines read, Holloway's Fall from Grace. I skimmed through the articles, my pulse quickening. He had been accused of academic fraud, of manipulating grades, of taking bribes from students desperate to pass his classes. It was a spectacular downfall, the kind that ruins a man completely. I didn't know how to feel. Holloway had been cruel to me. But I had moved on. I hadn't thought about him in years. So why did this feel strange? Like something wasn't right. Like the pieces didn't fit. I told myself it was a coincidence. I had bigger things to worry about: cases, clients, the never-ending workload that kept me at the office until long past midnight. Lana was always waiting for me when I came home. She had this way of making everything seem easy, effortless. The house was always in order. Dinner was always made, even if I wasn't around to eat it. And she always listened. But sometimes when she asked about my day, her questions felt too precise. Not just the usual, how was work, or did you have a tough case? No, she wanted details, specifics. She remembered names, situations, conflicts I had barely mentioned in passing. Sometimes she would bring up old stories, things I had told her months ago, and recite them back to me like she was piecing together a puzzle. It should have been endearing. It should have been a sign that she cared, but instead, it made me feel watched, like she was studying me. Then, the worst news came. One morning, as I was drinking my coffee and scrolling through my phone, I saw a notification that made my stomach drop. A boy had gone missing. Local police search for missing child. His name was Matthew Sinclair. He was the son of one of my colleagues at the firm, a man named Evan Sinclair. My blood ran cold. Evan was someone I barely tolerated, a smug, arrogant man who never missed an opportunity to throw a cheap shot my way. I could still hear his voice, in my head. A man like you should focus on his career, not on things he can't have. He had said it with a smirk years ago after learning that I had trouble conceiving, and now his son was gone. The entire city was looking for the boy. There were search parties, police investigations, desperate pleas from the family, and all I could think about was the pattern. Daniel Carter, Adrian Holloway, and now Evan Sinclair's child. One by one, people who had wronged me were suffering, and every time, Lana was right there beside me, calm, serene, unbothered. She would watch the news with an unreadable expression, sipping her tea, tilting her head slightly when reporters speculated about what had happened. And sometimes, just sometimes, I swore I saw the faintest trace of a smile. The storm arrived in the middle of a quiet afternoon. I was in my office, buried in paperwork, my mind still trying to shake off the unsettling thoughts that had been creeping up on me for weeks. The missing child, the disgraced professor, the suicide, the pattern I couldn't ignore. The way Lana's words echoed in my head, and then the door burst open. At first, I didn't recognize her. She was wild-eyed, her face twisted with fury, her breath coming in short, ragged bursts. A woman who had spent years swallowing anger until it burned its way out of her. Her hands trembled as she threw a thick envelope onto my desk, the contents spilling across the polished wood, dozens of photographs, glossy and damning. I looked up at her again, and recognition hit me like a fist to the gut. Emily, my ex-fiancée. The woman I had once planned to spend my life with. The woman who had shattered everything when I found out she had cheated on me weeks before our wedding. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she found her voice, thick with rage and something dangerously close to despair. "You did this. To me," she spat. "You ruined my life." I blinked, confused. "What the hell are you talking about?" She jabbed a shaking finger at the photos. "Look at them, you son of a bitch!" I reached for the nearest one, my stomach twisting as my eyes focused on the image. And then the world tilted. My breath hitched. My hands clenched around the edges of the picture, as if holding on to it could somehow keep reality from slipping through. My fingers. It was Emily's husband, in bed with another woman, a woman I knew better than anyone. Lana. The images blurred together as I flipped through them. Lana and Emily's husband in a hotel room, their bodies tangled together, his wedding, ring visible on the nightstand, different angles, different days, enough evidence to destroy a marriage, enough to shatter a life. I felt sick. Emily was still speaking, her voice rising, but I barely heard her. "You couldn't just let it go, could you?" she was saying. "You had to get even. You had to take everything from me just because I made one mistake." I slammed my palm onto the desk, making her jump. My voice came out hoarse. "I didn't do this," Emily scoffed. "Right. So I guess it's just a coincidence that your wife is in these pictures?" I swallowed hard. My mind was racing, connecting dots I didn't want to see. Emily had destroyed me once, and now, years later, Lana had destroyed her. It wasn't just revenge, it was a pattern, a terrifying, deliberate pattern. I shoved the photos back into the envelope and stood so abruptly my chair nearly toppled over. I needed answers. I needed to hear her say it. Without another word, I stormed past Emily, leaving her shouting after me as I all but ran to my car. The drive home was a blur. My heart pounded in my chest, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same as always. Peaceful, warm. I stepped inside, my breath ragged, and there she was, Lana. She was sitting on the couch, waiting for me. A cup of tea in her hands, her posture relaxed, her expression unreadable. But when she saw my face, her lips curved into something eerily close to amusement. "So," she said softly, tilting her head. "Did you like the pictures?" A cold shiver ran down my spine. I clenched my fists. "What the hell did you do, Lana?" She let out a small, almost playful sigh. "Oh, come on, Ray. You already know, don't you?" I shook my head, my pulse roaring in my ears. "Tell me." She set her cup down and stood, taking slow, deliberate steps toward me. Her gaze was steady, unashamed, as she reached out to brush invisible lint from my sleeve. "I slept with her husband," she said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. My body went rigid. "Why?" she smiled. "Because she hurt you, and she needed to know what that felt like." I took a step back. "Jesus Christ, Lana, that's not—" My voice caught. My mind was spinning. This wasn't just Emily. This wasn't just an affair. It was Daniel Carter. It was Adrian Holloway. It was Evan Sinclair's missing son. It was everything. My stomach lurched as realization hit me like a freight train. "Lana." I barely recognized my own voice. "What did you do?" Her eyes sparkled. "I took care of you." I staggered back. No. "You think it's a coincidence that people who hurt you keep getting what they deserve?" she asked, stepping closer. "You think the universe just suddenly decided to even the score for you?" Her fingers brushed against my cheek, and I flinched like I'd been burned. "I did this for you," she whispered. "Everything. For you." My stomach twisted. "The professor, Daniel Carter, the missing boy." She sighed as if I was being difficult. "They weren't good people, Ray. They got what was coming to them." I stared at her, horrified. "Where is the boy?" She smiled. "Safe." That single word sent my blood running cold. I reached for my phone, my fingers shaking. But before I could dial, Lana's hand shot out, knocking it to the ground. Her expression darkened. "You don't need to do that." I took a step back, my mind screaming at me to run, to get away from her. "Lana, this is insane." She blinked at me, genuinely confused. "But I love you." I let out a shaky breath. "You don't hurt people you love." She laughed, a soft, bitter sound. "No, Ray, you don't hurt the ones you love, but you protect them." My vision blurred with panic, my breath coming in shallow gasps. She had done all of this for me. And now, she was standing in front of me, calm, unrepentant. I had married a monster, and I never even saw it coming. I had to act fast. Lana was still between me and the phone, her expression unreadable. The woman I had married, the woman I had trusted, stood there, watching me, waiting for my next move. I took a slow, measured breath, forcing down the panic clawing at my chest. If I made a wrong move, if I showed too much fear, she'd know, and I wasn't sure what she would do next. "Lana," I said carefully, keeping my voice steady, "tell me where the boy is." She gave me a soft smile, the kind she used when she thought I was overcomplicating things. "I already told you, he's safe." "That's not an answer." Her head tilted slightly. "But it is. You just don't like it." My pulse pounded in my ears. She wasn't going to tell me willingly, which meant I had no choice. She didn't expect me to fight back. Lana had always seen me as the one she protected, the one she fixed things for. In her mind, she had done everything out of love. So when I lunged for her, when I grabbed her wrist and twisted it back, forcing her away from the phone, she gasped, not in pain, but in shock. "Ray!" Her voice cracked with betrayal, like I was the one who had hurt her. I didn't care. I had to stop her. She struggled, but I was stronger. I forced her down onto the floor, pinning her arms behind her back. She thrashed, shouting my name, her voice shifting from anger to something almost desperate. "Don't do this," she cried. "I did everything for you." I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, my belt from where it hung over a chair, and wrapped it around her wrists, tightening it enough to keep her from moving. "Lana, where is he?" I demanded. "Where is the kid?" Tears spilled down her face, but she just shook her head. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I love you." The words sent a sickening shiver through me. And then I heard the sirens. The police took over the moment they arrived. I barely remembered calling them. At some point, I must have grabbed my phone again, my hands shaking so badly I could barely press the numbers. But they came. They came fast. They pulled Lana from the floor. Her hands still bound. She didn't fight them. She just looked at me, and she smiled. "Don't worry," she said softly, as they led her out of the house. "I'll always be with you." The investigation was a nightmare. It turned out Lana had known exactly where Matthew Sinclair was. He had been taken but never harmed, hidden away in a remote cabin outside the city. She had been watching, waiting, but she never planned to hurt him. That was never the point. She just wanted Evan Sinclair to suffer, just like all the others, just like she thought they deserved. The evidence was overwhelming. The photographs, the connections between every single person who had wronged me and had mysteriously fallen apart. When the police started digging, they found more names, more planned punishments. She had been keeping track, and I hadn't seen it. I hadn't seen any of it. The guilt nearly swallowed me whole. The trial never happened. Lana was declared legally insane, unfit to stand trial. She was sent to a high-security psychiatric facility, locked away where she could never hurt anyone again, where she could never hurt for me again. I didn't go to see her, but she sent me letters, pages and pages of carefully written words as if she were still piecing together my story, memorizing me. She wrote about love, about how she forgave me for betraying her. She told me she'd wait. No matter how many years passed, no matter how much distance I tried to put between us, she would always wait. I burned every letter, but I still saw her words in my dreams. I couldn't stay in that house. I couldn't stay in that city. Every street, every familiar building, every courtroom reminded me of her, of what she had done, of what I had let happen. So I packed what little I could carry and left. I drove for days, as far as I could go, until the city was nothing but a distant memory. I changed my name, found a new job, a new life, but no matter how far I ran, I couldn't outrun her, because sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I still felt her watching me, and sometimes I still heard her voice, soft, loving, unbreakable. "I did this for you.